Welcome back, traders. It is your free weekly analysis from MFTC. Mighty fine. Pretty choppy week last week, at least that's how it ended. But hopefully this week, the data coming out of multiple major countries will give the markets a little bit more of a unidirectional trend. Not so much ranging, not so much chop. But for the most part, we're kind of just waiting on the US dollar, for example, for this range to break one way or the other. Now, it could just continue to bounce around in here, and we could see price continue to just range up on all this news coming out. Who knows? But the things that I would be most interested in are predominantly a break of this intraday major supply that I have marked out here. We're kind of just stuck, like I said, in this range, but if we break above this, we'll likely come back up to the upside, where we'll then have a key break or bounce retest of that range supply. From a macroeconomic standpoint, and just based on what the Fed has been saying, members of the Fed the past week, data, so on and so forth, I think the dollar still remains strong. We're seeing a little bit of inflation being combated, but I think personally the dollar remains strong from a fundamental standpoint. From a technical standpoint, this range just will really tell. If we break the bottom of it, then we're most likely going to come down into this demand down here, which is kind of our high time frame major demand. We did have a big daily kind of intra-week break of flow right here. So if we did get that exit to the downside, this would be a key retest here, and anything below that major demand is going to shift our our bias into very much more bearish. So do keep that in mind. Vice versa, if we get above the range here, looking a lot more bullish, and then we're just coming back in for a trend high retest. Another major breaker bounce situation. And if we get above it, then we're bullish in trend for sure. However, if price just continues to bounce around between these two gray boxes within this range, then you're pretty much just playing the highs and the lows. So keep that in mind. And that's sort of going to inform our bias on a few other major pairs. We're going to want to watch the DXY really closely this week, because I think it's going to be very indicative of how those other pairs may be moving. If, for example, we see a transition within this range demand here, and we see price start to creep back upwards, I would anticipate that things like EURUSD, GBPUSD, or AUDUSD all start pushing down. And then the opposite would be true as well. If price starts pushing down on the dollar, for example, then we may be seeing these push up slightly higher. EURUSD isn't ranged up as much as the dollar. It's a little bit more unidirectional. However, I want to go up to the daily chart for you here and just point out that we did have a daily break of flow here. And I find that interesting. When we start to look at the smaller time frames, this is a really key area of supply here. We're starting to see that price is pushing up towards it, and there's pretty good volume coming into that push. However, I think this is going to be a major break or bounce situation for the week. Anything below this level here starts to look a lot more bearish. Then again, you have a major break or bounce situation on that sort of daily demand or intra-week major demand where all that liquidity is living. So break or bounce situation there. But anything below this level here is a lot more bearish, and anything below our red zone there would be a trend expansion to the downside, and it would be extremely bearish. So keep that in mind. Here's sort of my bias map for the week based on these key levels. GBPUSD, pretty damn choppy coming into last week. If we look at the daily chart, it's a bit mixed. We have a little bit of a daily break flow to the upside here, but then we came up into this sort of weekly demand that turned back into a daily supply. We had this big voluminous rejection here on Thursday the 12th. Looking at a slightly smaller intraday chart, I think price, like I indicate here, has lost a lot of its trending momentum towards the end of the week. If we're being extremely technical, then I would say that we are in a bearish flow currently, based on this H4 supply here, giving us this last major push to the downside into the flow low labeled here. However, since then, prices just kind of started to bounce around and mimic the range that we're seeing on the dollar. So starting out this week, I'm interested to see what happens here in this low time frame supply zone, and if price taps into that or breaks above it, or if price just comes back down into this, or what's going on. But either way, for GBPUSD this week, I need a little bit more data because we're not really clearly trending, and I don't really care to play new positions into a range. If we come up into this H4 supply and then we see a transition, then I might consider a push to the downside, but I want to be really careful because it could just be kind of an easy pick and sucker level, and we may see a deeper pullback. Vice versa, if we get a break below the flow low, then we'll look for the break and retest expansion into the trend low because we have a lot more bearish bias below this area here. AUDUSD, very rangy transitional phase. So looking at the daily chart, this one very bearish as well. This is your last major daily supply. It provided this low here, and then price failed to break into a new low here. It just barely missed that level, but couldn't break below it. Then we saw a bit of a bounce. Now we're coming back down, and then we're ranged up. So again, need a bit more data. We're stuck in this big transitional phase range situation. Levels that I'm going to be watching are these yellow levels, which are sort of my intraday range supply and demand levels. If price breaks above this, look for the retest here and see what happens. Any bearish rejection, I'll still look for a short. However, anything above that starts to look a lot more bullish, like that. So breaker bounce situation here, which is quite interesting. Anything below this, we start to look more bearish, but I wouldn't take it there. I would wait for price to come down below and give us a flow low expansion where we can trade into this next region down into the 0.62s roughly. And that's really it. Last week, very accurate analysis and predictions for Nasdaq for all of those who trade Nasdaq. I said that we're trading relative to sort of this area, then we look for some sort of pullback. We got a pullback pretty much directly onto the area that I forecasted, and then a transition to the downside. Lots of high volume starting to pick up. The VIX is up. Geopolitical tensions are up. And a lot of uncertainty. So money's moving out of high risk assets like Nasdaq. This one really fell on its face the most out of domestic equities last week. So high volume pushed down to the downside. We're coming into an interesting area of demand, but we're not quite there yet. So if you were looking to trade this current flow leg, then I would look for a pullback into one of these eyeballs and a transition into bearish flow, preferably the lower one, and then a continuation down here into about 14,480. That's it for the week, guys. If you are interested in learning free stuff, go join my Discord. Link is below this thing. Give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment if you have a question or if you just want to say what's up. It helps other people get exposure of this video. The algorithm will push it to more people that way. And if you need anything, you know, always just shoot me a DM or whatever on that Discord as well. So trade smart, trade safe, be patient, wait for key levels. I'll talk to you next week.